So I just want to start by saying this is my third time filming this video, so this one is going up no matter what it looks like. So far this year, my reading has not been to the level I'm used to. I read 1 book in February and I read 3 books in March, but I have definitely been able to finally reintegrate reading into my schedule. I'm finding weekends is a really good time to get through fiction and weekdays is a good time to get through nonfiction. So I have a little bit of a more ambitious TBR list for this month, although I have split it into books that I want to finish this month versus books that I want to start this month but don't necessarily intend to finish them. So the first book I want to talk about is Dream Count. I am a big fan of Chimamanda. I think I've read all of her books. When this new one came out, I was a little bit hesitant about whether I wanted to read it right away or if I wanted to wait. I just find sometimes when there's a lot of hype about things, I end up getting disappointed. But I put in the request from my local library for the audiobook, and I got a copy of a skip the line copy, which my library does, where instead of listening to it for the full 21 days, you get it for 7 days. Sometimes I'm able to finish the whole book with that 7-day loan. I'm not going to do that in this instant, but I've started it and I'm about 3 hours or so into the audiobook and I am really liking it. So I'm not going to get into spoilers, and honestly, I'm not that far into it. But from what I understand, this book follows a number of characters sort of going through life, dealing with love and loss and exploring what their lives are like. The character I'm reading about right now is Nigerian. I'm assuming they all are, but I'm not completely sure. And the current character I'm following is a Nigerian woman. She lives in America, but has family back home. One thing I will say that I've liked about it so far is the beginning of the book deals with the pandemic. And I actually haven't read a lot of books that talk about life in the pandemic. I feel like I kind of blocked the pandemic out of my memory a little bit. And I really want to go back and remember what that whole experience was like. Now the character is in a relationship with this man who's a professor, and I'm finding it very, very interesting, very fascinating, because I wouldn't say I'm exactly the same way as this character. I think maybe a younger version of myself would have been very similar to her. When you're a little bit too sort of quiet of a person, too appeasing, how those sorts of people could potentially take advantage of you. So I'm finding her relationship with this man to be very, very interesting. I think just because you don't often see a character that just like reminds you so much of yourself, even to the level of like being the same background as you. So far, really liking it. I'm hoping the other characters are similar. Like, I've noticed each chapter is a different person's name. And for example, this first chapter I'm on, it's about 4 hours. So I just sometimes get worried when books are like that, because sometimes you're very invested in one particular character in their life, and then you get to another character that you don't particularly care for, and then you don't really like the book because that character's arc has finished. So anyway, I'm really liking this first chapter. I'm hoping it stays like this the whole way through. So the second book I want to talk about is The Trial by Franz Kafka. I also have started reading this. I will just add that I have started posting on TikTok, and I talked about this a little bit on my TikTok video a few weeks ago. I am working as a lawyer, if you're new to my channel, and there is definitely something to be said about the absurdity of the court system and definitely about trials. And I was having a moment a few weeks ago where I just felt like the whole thing was so bizarre. And I was looking for a novel that dealt with it in a good way. And I decided to go to The Trial by Franz Kafka. I also may look into some parts of the Brothers Karamazov, because the end part of that book also deals with the trial in a very interesting way. But I wanted to start with Kafka because Kafka's books are always just like very absurd, and that's exactly what I wanted. So I initially was listening to this as an audiobook. I didn't like the narrator, so I've now started reading it. And it's going to be absurd no matter which way you consume it. I feel like reading the ebook is probably my preferred method for this. It follows this man who is accused of something, but like can't for the life of himself figure out what his crime is. So we follow him through this whole court procedure. And again, it just shows the absurdity of it all. I'm very interested into understanding why Kafka wrote this book, Like, I think the background behind this novel is going to be very interesting once I finish it. The one thing I will say, and sometimes I don't know if I'm just being like a little bit too, I don't know what the word is, but I really don't like the way the female characters are depicted in this book. Like, there was this one scene where he was having this interaction with this woman who was living in the same house as him, and it was very strange. Like, it felt like the character was a bit of a creep, and no one is really talking about it. I did find one subreddit, gotta thank Reddit, where people were talking about it. But I haven't really seen anyone else talk about or mention that as being something that bothered them in this book. So I want to continue and see if it's just me or if it gets a little bit better. But I mean, it's obviously not just me if there is that one subreddit talking about it also. I'm interested to see where it goes. I have no idea where this is going, if I'm being very honest. If I don't make a lot of progress, I think I'll just spend Easter weekend trying to get through the whole thing. Next is a book that I own. I think it's actually the only book on this list that I own, and that is No Exit by Jean-Paul Sartre. This book actually contains a few other plays, but No Exit is the one that I want to read. So I was watching this video. I can't remember the YouTuber's name. I'll see if I can include a link in the description. And she was talking about some of her favorite existential works of literature. And as soon as I saw the video title, I was like, this is my gal. Like, I love existential dread. I love thinking about things like this all the time. Probably for some people, it's very weird and very intense, but like, this is what I enjoy doing. And in that video, she was talking about this play, No Exit. She said it's very short. And I was looking, it's only 45 pages in my edition. So I think I can actually get through it. I struggle with plays, and I've struggled to read Sartre many times, but I feel like 45 pages, like, you can do this. I started reading it yesterday when I was on my way to the Art Gallery of Ontario. I talk about that a little bit in my vlog if you want to find out a little bit more about that. And so I was reading it on the train, and as I was waiting for my friend. So I think I got through, yeah, I'm on page 10, so pretty good. It's so funny, when I was at the Art Gallery of Ontario, I was reading it in the line, and there was this like older white man in front of me, and he kept turning around trying to see what I was reading, to the point where he was literally like this, like trying to read my book. And I was like, I don't know if he's thrown off by the fact that I'm reading Sartre, or just like by the fact that this like Black woman is reading. Like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm feeling like very, like, it felt very absurd that he was acting that way about me reading this book. So it kind of now makes me want to only read this book when I'm out and about, just to see people's reactions. Because I don't know, I found it at my local used bookstore. Like, obviously other people read this. Another book, and I actually just added this book today, is Severance by Ling. I have been waiting for this one from my library. I've gotten it a few times and I've never finished it. This is the time I finish it. So last month I got through a work of dystopian literature by a feminist author, and it was I Who Have Never Known Men. I believe that was what it was called. I didn't love it, but I thought it was pretty good. It made me think that I want to read more science fiction dystopian works by feminist authors. So I was looking for the next one to be by a woman of color. And so I thought of this one by Ling. I've started listening to the audiobook before, and I did quite like it. I can't remember the specifics of what it was about, but it was a woman living in New York, and this sort of like the end of the world happens, and it was very satirical. I remember I was finding it quite funny. The world right now feels like something out of a work of science fiction, like 1984. Science fiction just feels like what I want to read at the moment. So I'm going to try, at least for the next little bit, to read one work of science fiction every month. And then the final book that I actually am planning to get through in April is On Anarchism by Chomsky. I talk about it a little bit in my vlog. I picked up this like anthology of political writings, and one of them was by Thoreau on civil disobedience, and I was just reading the blurb that was about Thoreau, and he was described as an anarchist. And I just felt like in order to really understand his essay the best way possible, I should really understand anarchism a little bit deeper. And then I remembered I had started reading On Anarchism by Chomsky and never finished it. I do think I have a reading vlog where I read like the first few pages or a few chapters. If I do, I'll include that. So this is the month I finally read On Anarchism. I don't really know a lot about anarchism, which is why I picked up this book last year. And I have really been wanting to get through more of Chomsky's works. Sorry, I ran out of space in my memory card. I was talking recently on one of my TikTok videos about how I feel like I don't really like the Chomsky books I've read so far, and they've all been essay collections. I much prefer him when he is dealing with a particular topic because he has so much information, and I just feel like him going very deeply into that information is where he really shines. So I figure this sort of kills two birds with one stone. One, I get to finally read and learn and understand the concept of anarchism. And two, I get to read another of Chomsky's works that's him talking on one particular topic. Okay, now I'm going to talk about books that I'm starting to read this month. I'm okay if I don't finish them, although some of them I might be able to. The first is this fiction called Nigeria, and this is by Adéwálé májà-pearce. I've talked about this on my TikTok channel. This is a book, it came out last year, published by Verso. That's how I found out about it. And it's sort of dealing with the modern day issues within Nigeria and with respect to Nigerian democracy. I am Nigerian, but I definitely feel very disconnected from it as a country, and I don't know a lot about Nigerian politics, and so I'm trying to inform myself more about that. So that is why I'm going to read this book. So far, I would say this is the one book I've been reading like every day. I just like to read a little bit in the morning before work, if I wake up early enough. If not, I'll just like read it throughout the day. But I'm really liking it. I'm finding it very eye-opening and very interesting. So I kind of hope I can finish it this month because I want to be able to talk about it, but we'll see. I'm not going to put too much pressure on myself. Next is Bread and Roses, Gender and Class Under Capitalism. And this is by Andrea Datry. I think that's how you say her name. So I've read a few books so far about feminism. I read The Right to Sex by Mia Shinavizan, which I really like. And then I also read Feminism Interrupted by Lola Olufemi. Also currently working through The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, but that one I think I'll finish in like the winter time. But I'm looking for a book that's like really talking about the history of feminism and is really just a very historical book. I feel like the closest to that so far has been The Right to Sex, but The Right to Sex, I don't find it a good like reference book. I'm looking for something that if I want to know what was going on at this particular time in the feminist movement, I can just easily find it in this book. And The Right to Sex doesn't quite do that. It gives you a little bit of the lay of the land, but it's very, very brief. So anyway, I'd come across this book last year. I'd started reading it, like I got the Kindle sample, and I quite enjoyed it. I just felt like I wasn't in a space to like really be learning all about feminist history, but now I'm there, I'm ready. So I am going to work through this. I don't expect to finish this in April. I think if I finish this in April, I'm probably doing it a disservice. So I got the ebook and I plan to work through it like a little bit each month. I would be over the moon if I finish in the summer, and I also would be very happy if I finish in the fall. So maybe if I just do like one chapter every few weeks. That's sort of how I see myself working through that one. Okay, next is Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens. This is another one that I've been wanting to read for a while, and I decided to read it. I don't know if it's funny or if it's sad. I saw a tweet the other day, and I actually have not gone to fact check it and make sure it's correct, but they were saying that you can now use Klarna or like one of those afterpay systems for DoorDash. Meaning you can order McDonald's on DoorDash and pay back your McDonald's over like 4 installments. And when I saw that, I was like, this is terrifying. Like, what level of capitalism have we reached that you are using credit to pay for fast food? And then I saw a tweet, if I can find it, I'll include it. And someone said, oh my gosh, we're going to be going back to the time of debtor prisons. And that made me think of Little Dorrit, because that is just how my brain works. So I came across this book a while ago, like maybe a year ago. I don't remember. And it seemed really interesting about this one character whose father is locked up in prison because he owes debt. And I've heard that this is a very like scathing book when it comes to looking at political systems or like the institutions and capitalism. I've actually never read any of Dickens' work, so I don't know at all what to expect, but this felt like a good one to start with. So I am going to give this a read. It's fairly long. I think it's like 860 pages. So I don't expect to finish it in April. If I do, I would be very surprised. But I am trying to get back into reading longer classics because this summer, or this year, I'll say, I am getting through Adam Buenos Aires, and that is like a 600, 700 page book and does not come as an audiobook. So I need to work my way up to reading longer classics again so I can finally tackle that book. So the last book I want to talk about is the Penguin Book of Spiritual Verse, and this is an anthology compiled by Kaveh Akbar. Last year I read Martyr by Kaveh Akbar and really enjoyed it. It's definitely not my favorite book of all time, but I thought it raised very interesting concepts and I thought it was written in a very unique way. So as soon as I finished reading Martyr, I looked for all of the other things Akbar had written and I came across this. And I've been wanting to read it. I just wasn't really sure of when was a good time, but I think I'm finally ready for a few reasons. First of all, every year I'm trying to add more new genres to the books that I read, and one genre I don't really read a lot of is poetry, but I do want to change that because when people give feedback on certain books, they'll be like, oh, I didn't really like this because I don't really enjoy poetry, and the books they're referring to are always books that I really enjoyed. So I think I actually would really like poetry. I just need to give it a chance. And I always have been very interested in books dealing with religious or spiritual themes, and so this sort of feels like a way to kill two birds with one stone. I plan to read, I would say, 1 or 2 poems every day, probably before bed. It deals with a lot of different poets. So it has some of Dante's quotes. It has some works by Aquinas, Rumi. There's also one by the Yoruba people, it's like a tribe in Nigeria. So I think that's very interesting. Shakespeare, Césaire, also was not expecting that. Frederick Douglass, Virgil, then some passages from the Quran, the Bible, also some poetry by Sappho and Lao Tzu. I think that's how you pronounce it. So it seems to be very expansive in scope when it comes to looking at spiritual verses from loads of different religious traditions. So very excited to give this a read. I have the ebook. I probably will buy the physical book because it just feels like a nice one to maybe have with you all the time and just pick up and read a poem every now and then. I don't think this will take me that long to get through. I don't think it's going to require me to work through it very slowly the way some of the other books will, but I also just don't want to rush myself. I feel like if you read too much poetry back to back, it you kind of lose the meaning of what it's about. But then that being said, last year I was reading Rumi's book. I actually quite liked it, I just never finished it. And I did actually quite like listening to that all in one go in the morning. So we'll see. Maybe I actually will read a few poems every morning and get through it faster than I expected. Anyway, those are the books I plan to either finish or at least start in April. I'm trying to be much more realistic with my TBRs. There are so many books I want to read, but work is still relatively busy. I'm also have a somewhat busy social life, trying to do lots of different things, and I don't want to overwhelm myself with the books that I'm reading. I also do a lot of reading at work. So sometimes after a full day of reading cases, reading affidavits, I don't really feel like reading anymore, which is why audiobooks are great. And I think that's why things like science fiction are a nice distraction, but the nonfiction definitely takes me longer to read. And I also don't always feel like reading on the weekend, if I'm being very honest. So that is my list for April. Let me know if there are any books that you're planning on reading this month. Some people don't like having an ever-growing list of books you feel like you're never going to reach, but I actually quite like it because I try and read based on things that are going on in the world. I would say I try and consume media in general in that way. So I love coming across new books and, just putting them in the back of my brain for when they're going to be relevant to read. So please let me know what books you plan to read this month. If there are any books that you have that you want to share, if someone is really into feminist dystopian literature, please give me your recommendations. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for watching. This channel is all about re-education and decolonizing the mind. Last year, I went on a journey of re-education and decolonizing my own mind, and I created this channel as a way to share what I'm reading and learning with the world. If you want to come along with me on this journey, feel free to subscribe. And if you like this, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for all the love and support. I'll see you in the next one.